In this recording, we're going to look at something called factorials. Here's an example of how factorials work. Suppose you have a 5 with an exclamation point after that. In math, what that means is you take the number you're given here, which is 5, and you multiply that number by the next integer below it times the next integer below it, and you keep going down until you get to 1. Whatever that's equal to, that is your answer, and if you do the math on all that, you will get 120. So 5 factorial equals 120. So what does factorial mean? Well, if we're going to find the factorial of any number, and I'm going to call that number n, if we're going to find the factorial of any number, what that's equal to is the number you're given, so that's equal to n, times the number that comes after that, 1 less than that, so n minus 1, times the number that's 1 less than that, so that would then be n minus 2, and so on, all the way until you get down to 1. That's what n factorial is. So the next one we're going to do is just look at 4 factorial. If you want to, pause the video, see if you can figure out 4 factorial by yourself, restart the video, and see if you get the answer that I'm about to give you. Okay, 4 factorial means start with the 4 and multiply it by all the integers below it until you get to 1. If you do the math on that, you will get 24. So 4 factorial is 24. If I ask you for 1 factorial, that means start with 1 and go all the way down to 1. We're already at 1, so the answer is the number 1. 1 factorial is 1. You might think that 0 factorial makes no sense, and given the way I've explained what factorial means, you would be right. But it turns out that 0 factorial is considered to be 1 also. So be sure you know that 0 factorial is 1. Maybe at the end of this recording, I will show you why 0 factorial is considered to be 1. But for the moment, just trust that it's equal to 1. And you don't have to watch the part of the video where I explain why it's equal to 1. Just be sure you know it. Okay, so technically, and you don't need to know this thing either, but technically, n factorial is not really equal to n times n minus 1 times n minus 2, and so on, all the way down until you get to 1. It's only equal to that if the number you're starting with is like the 4 or the 1 or the 5. Then it will give you that. So it only works if n is greater than or equal to 1. If n is equal to 0, then what you end up getting is the number 1. And that's what happens if n is equal. Technically, this is what n factorial really means. You do not need to know this, but I'm just trying to be technically correct here. Okay, you also need to know how to find factorials on a calculator. So let's take a look at how you would find 7 factorial on a calculator. Now 7 factorial, if we did not have a calculator, you would do 7 times 6 times 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. If you do all the math on that, you will get 5,040. But let's see how you would do it on a calculator. So on your calculator, you're first going to click on 7. So you would do 7. After that, you would go to the little button that says Math. So then we do Math. After you go to Math, if you look at the top of the Math screen, there's a PRB. So I'm going to go across to PRB. So the next thing is to choose the PRB option. PRB, by the way, stands for probability. You don't really need to know that, but that's what it stands for. And then you will see the factorial there is option 4. Now, so we choose option 4. One way is to go down and press enter. The other way is just to press the 4 on the calculator. Either way, now we have the 7 followed by the factorial. Then you do enter. Oh, let me put here option 4. Now on another calculator, it might be a different option, but on this calculator, it's option 4. Basically, you're looking for the option that says exclamation point on it or factorial sign. And then you press enter, and that gives you the answer. Be sure you know how to do these by hand. Be sure you do not depend on the calculator to give you the answers. Okay, so let's do another one. 32 factorial. Now, 32 factorial turns out to be gigantic. In fact, you don't have to have that big of a number in order to get a really large answer. We only have 32, and that's already really large. 32 factorial, we're going to write that in scientific notation. So we're going to write that in scientific notation. And I'm going to round the beginning of that answer to 3 decimal places. Scientific notation, 3 decimal places. So let's do that. So I'll put in 32 on the calculator. Then I'll do math. Then I'll go across to probability. Then I would choose option 4. Then I would press enter. And the answer is 2.631 to 3 decimal places. At the end of that is an E35, and that's just the way the calculator says. What the calculator means by that is times 10 to the 35 power. So that is approximately what 32 factorial is. That's only an approximation. Even the entire number you see on the calculator is only an approximation. We don't have a way to get the exact answer without basically doing this by hand. And that would be a lot of work to multiply those 32 numbers together. So that's the answer in scientific notation. Okay, let's do another problem. Here's an example of a problem that you've got to be sure you know how to do by hand. Because if you do it on the calculator will actually give you an error. It doesn't know how to handle it. We're going to do 698 factorial over 697 factorial. You might be thinking, well, that's going to be a lot of work by hand. Don't worry, it's not going to take us a lot of time at all. The numerator, we know that means 698 times 697 times 696 times 6. I wish I could write what my brain is thinking, times 695 times 694 times all the way down eventually to 1. The denominator is 697 times 696 times 695 times 694 all the way down to 1. Everything cancels. We end up with 698. So that is the answer to the question. 698 factorial over 697 factorial is 698. And you might be thinking, okay, that's just some little mathematical thing that maybe you would ask on a test, but it's not useful. No, this is actually very useful to be able to do this. This kind of problem actually comes up in the real world. So the answer is 698. Okay. I recommend that you pause the video and you try this next thing and see if you can figure out what 48 factorial over 45 factorial is equal to. And I will tell you, you will end up with a 6-digit number if you want to see if you're actually getting it right before I show you. Pause the video and try this one. Okay, so we do it the same way. We get 48 times 47 times 46 times 45 times 44 times 43, and so on, all the way down to 1. In the denominator, we get 45 times 44 times 43, all the way down to 1. All of these common things cancel. So we're left with whatever 48 times 47 times 46 is. And if you do the math on that, you get 103,776. So that is what that is equal to. Again, be sure you know how to do these by hand, because your calculator can't do some of these things. Okay, we have a little bit more to look at with factorials. The next thing we're going to look at is something that has a parentheses. It's got a number on the top, which I'm going to call n. It's got a number on the bottom, which I'm going to call j. It's not a fraction. There's no fraction bar in there. It's got a top number and a bottom number. Different people call this different things. In fact, I can think of 3 different ways of describing this. I'm going to call it what I got used to calling it, which is n choose j. We're going to look at later on why it's called n choose j, although that will also be optional, and that'll be part of the optional stuff at the end of the video if you choose to watch it. You don't have to. Okay, the first thing we should look at is what is the formula for n choose j. And this is a very useful thing, n choose j. The formula for that is you get a fraction. The numerator of the fraction is whatever number's on top, so n, but factorial. The denominator is whatever number's on bottom, so j, also factorial. And you might think that's the end of it, but it's not. That gets multiplied by what you get by subtracting the top number minus the bottom number. And for n choose j, whenever you have this kind of thing, the top number is always either bigger than or equal to the bottom number. The bottom number is never bigger. And then you're supposed to take this part and also do a factorial on that. This is the formula for n choose j. So let's look at an example. We're going to look at the example of 5 choose 2. And in fact, later on, we're going to look at this same example again, so it'll help if we remember the answer. 5 choose 2 is equal to 5 factorial on top, 2 factorial on bottom, and then you multiply that by the difference of the two numbers, so 5 minus 2, with the factorial at the end of that. So that means it's equal to 5 factorial over 2 factorial. This, of course, is 3. So that's going to give us 3 factorial, and those are multiplied down there. Now, 5 factorial we did right in the beginning, and that turned out to be 120. 2 factorial you can figure out is 2. 3 factorial you can figure out is 6. So that's 120 over 12, and 120 over 12 is equal to 10. So 5 choose 2 is equal to 10. Okay, the next one we're going to look at is 7 choose 0. You can do 7 choose 0. Let me see, can I get the formula on the screen at the same time? No, but pause the video and see if you can get the answer using that formula for 7 choose 0. Pause the video, try it, and then restart the video. Okay, 7 choose 0, according to our formula, is the top number factorial over the bottom number factorial times the difference of the two numbers, then factorial. So that's equal to 7 factorial over, if you remember what I told you earlier, 0 factorial is 1, so that's 1. And then 7 minus 0 factorial, well, that's 7 minus 0, which is 7, and then factorial. I don't even need to compute anything else. Well, let me do one more thing here. So that's 7 factorial over 7 factorial. The numerator and denominator match, so that's equal to 1. In fact, it turns out that will always be true. Here's what I mean by that will always be true. If you ever have any number on top and 0 on the bottom, that thing is always equal to 1. For the same reason this one turned out to be 1, that will always be equal to 1. So for example, if I ask you for 43,876, choose 0, the answer is 1. Okay, let's do another one. We're going to do 200, choose 199. Again, I recommend you pause the video and try that. So if we use the formula, that's 200 factorial over 199 factorial. Hopefully you've got the idea by now, so you know the last part's going to be 1 factorial. The 1, in case you're confused, comes from doing 200 minus 199. So that's 200 factorial over 199 factorial. And if you remember, 1 factorial is 1, so that's times 1. So this is equal to 200 factorial over 199 factorial. If you've got the idea, maybe you can even do that in your head and see the answer, but let me go further. So this is 200 times 199. Hang on one second, let me fix the screen here, okay? Times 198 times 197, and so on all the way down to 1, divided by 199 times 198 times 197, all the way down to 1. Everything cancels here, and you're left with the 200, so the answer is 200. What was the original question? It was 200, choose 199. Notice the answer to that is the number that's on the top. That's always going to be true. What do I mean by that? Well, suppose you're doing one of these things and you have a number on top, and suppose the number below it is 1 less than that. Then the answer to that will always end up being the number on top. As an example, if I ask you what is 1,897 over 1,896, reading that more correctly, you would say 1,897, choose 1,896. The answer would be 1,897. That's how that works. Okay, let's take a look at the calculator. We're going to do 5, choose 2 on the calculator. Again, be sure you can do these by hand. So to do it on the calculator, let me just show you ahead of time first. I'm going to go to Math. I'm going to go to this probability thing. And do you see the third option is NCR? N, choose R. That's what we're going to do here. So the way you're going to do that is you're going to do the 5, then you will do Math, then you'll go to probability, you'll choose the NCR option, then you'll put in the 2, and then you'll press enter. Do you see the 10 there? Remember the answer was 10? So let me write down how to do that. To do, for example, let's just do the 5, choose 2 example. To do the 5, choose 2 example on your calculator, you will first have to enter the 5. Then you will do the Math key. After you do the Math key, you're going to go to the probability part. So you'll go over to PRB. After you do the probability, you will go to the NCR option, which is option 3 in this case. Then you will have to enter the 2 on your calculator to get the 2 there. And then you'll press equals, not equals, enter. And that gives you 5, choose 2. And of course, you can do any of these that way. So that's how you do that on the calculator. Okay, everything else that I have to say is optional. You don't have to hear it. You're welcome to watch it. I encourage you to watch it, but you don't need to know it. The first thing is relatively short, and then the second thing is not very long, but it's a little bit longer. Let's get the short one out of the way first. Okay, we're going to look at 0 factorial. What we're going to look at is why is 0 factorial Why is 0 factorial equal to 1? Actually, I think I'm going to skip that and just do the other thing. So let's look at why is this thing, for instance, 5 choose 2, why is that called 5 choose 2? And of course, this is true no matter what the number on top is and what the number on bottom is. Well, here's what that means. What that means is suppose you have 5 objects. I'm going to call them A, B, C, D, and E. And suppose somebody says to you, pick any 2 of those objects, like maybe B and E. Pick any 2 of those objects. 5 choose 2 tells you how many ways you can actually do that. If you watch, you will see one way to do that is to choose A and B, or you could choose A and C, or A and D, or A and E, or you could choose B and C, you could choose B and D, or you could choose B and E, or you could choose C and D, C and E, excuse the even worse than usual handwriting, C and E, or you could choose D and E. If you think about it, these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, these are the only 10 ways you could choose 2 objects from the group of 5. That's why it's equal to 10. It tells you the number of ways of choosing this and many objects from a group of that size, and that always works. It will always tell you that. In other words, if you were computing 172, choose 58, whatever that answer is, I don't know what it is, I don't even want to know, but that would tell you the number of ways you could take 172 objects and choose 58 of them. Okay, that is the end of this recording.